Hey guys, good morning. Today I want to give a quick chat about maintaining your tackle. Now, I think this is something that many of us have not been particularly good at. Some of us are worse than others. So today, with the fishing season coming up quite soon, I wanted to give you a quick video on how the best way to look after that very expensive tackle of yours is. Let's get into it. So I'm going to talk about this in two different stages. The first one is what you do at the end of the day of your last day of your trip or the day of your fishing. We all know what it's like, especially on a long trip. You're a bit tired, you're a bit knackered, and the last thing you feel like doing is actually looking after your toys and kit or cleaning it all down, etc. You actually really just want to throw everything in the bag, go and have a drink and have a good knees up about how the week went. This is really, really crucial, because if you spend 10-15 minutes sorting out your kit right now, it could really, really save you a load of heartache later, especially in the salt. Salt is incredibly corrosive. You don't want that salt crust or salt residue to be on your anodized rings, rod fittings and reels any longer than it has to be. Ideally, you really want to be washing that stuff down at the end of every day. And a lot of operations, guides will do that for you. By the end of the week, you will find that your lines become a bit sticky. Maybe they don't shoot quite as well as they were at the beginning of the week. And if you do find that, then running it through a line cleaner box or something like that with a bit of Armorol will greatly increase your distance. But so we've come to the end of our trip. We're detackling. It's that stage where you're trying to find everything, put it all together so you can take it back to your room, etc. And what I do at that point is I take 15 to 20 minutes to sort out my gear right then and there. And that means that if I don't have the time to sort it out when I get home, I know that it's not going to be the end of the world and I'm not going to open up my rod bag and smell mildew and rather moldy cork the next time that I'm heading out on a trip. So the first thing I do is I take all my rods apart. And one thing I will say is if you have a number of the same rod, same manufacturer and same model even, make sure that you keep all the sections separate. I have seen that one go horribly awry with seven weight sections ending up in 9 weight rods. Suddenly the action's all gone, etc. So what I tend to do is I do one at a time, and I also put maybe little rubber bands around the ends of each of my rods, so that I know that I've got my 7, my 9, my 11 and my 12 and they're all separated, so I'm not going to have any issue with that. So the first thing I do is actually I either take the whole lot in the shower with me and wash it all down while I'm in the shower, or I find a sink or a basin and I fill it up with warm soapy water and then I wash all my rod sections down. Let's talk about reels first. So we take the reel. The best thing to do at that point is to take the reel out of its cage and chuck the whole lot straight in a big basin of preferably warm, hot, soapy water and let that soak. And the soap actually helps you. It shouldn't be strong soap, something very, very mild. And what that does is it actually gets into the salt crust and residue and actually helps take it off, or otherwise it actually sticks to the anodize. And the last thing that you want is salt corrosion in between your backing and your spool. The salt will actually eat away at the spool. It'll end up pitting it and it'll end up potentially ruining the actual structure of the reel if you haven't looked after it well enough. Also, it's the drags which are very, very important. If you get salt crust eating away at your drag plate or your drag mechanism, you can find that your drag could fail the next time you're hooked into that fish of a lifetime. So reels, all my reels separated straight into a big bucket of warm soapy water and let them soak. And in the meantime, I'll then again with I tend to carry a J-cloth with me or something like that. And what I'm going to do is I am going to start with the butt section. Give the cork a good wash down and make sure that you get into all of the different parts of the screw fitting, because salt tends to really get in there. Make sure you run those locking nuts back down again. Give that a really good scrub. Give the handle a nice wash down. And then run it up the section. And then what I do with these is I then lay them out on a towel to dry. So run it through there. The rings are vitally important. So what I tend to do with here is I take the corner of my cloth and I push it through the ring and I actually give it a good scrub like that. And also underneath the ring up against the rod blank. This is an area that often gets salt infusion in there, and that can really eat away at the feet of your rings. So give that a good scrub, get your finger in the eyes there. It's really, really important to look after this stuff. At the end of the day, you've spent an awful lot of money on this kit and you want it to last you for a long time. And if you look after it, it will. So then the next section, why don't you talk amongst yourselves while I quickly run through this. Okay, so that's my rods all cleaned down and I'm going to leave those to dry and I'm going to turn my attention back to my reels. So now that they've been soaking for a little while, I'm going to give them a good scrub with the warm soapy water. Use a cloth, get into all the little nooks and crannies that you can, especially in up against the cage itself. If you start seeing salt residue up against your backing and your cage, you know that you could end up with issues later on. The reel handle as well, you know, that moves freely at the moment, but as soon as you get some salt in there, then that can change that very, very quickly. Also, it can actually corrode the pin that holds your reel handle underneath without you knowing. So the next time you're fighting a big fish, it can fall off. Not a good thing. Okay, so we've given that a good wash down. Back into the clean, fresh water. Especially with all of these modern day vented reels. The other thing that's very important is you want to make sure that you loosen off all of the drags on your reels. That will maintain your drag plates over a period of time, and especially when it comes to the older reel styles like the T-bores and the A-bores, which have got the cork calipers, that's really, really important to keep that going. So I've given that all a good wash down. Reels like this though, the Fortuna, have got a completely sealed drag, so I'm not too worried about what's going on inside there. So give that all a good wash down. Then what I do is I've got a towel laid out on the side of my bed probably, or somewhere like that, and I leave the reel and the cages to actually just sit on that towel and let all the water dribble out of it. So while my reels are drying off there, I mean, if you can put them in some sunlight or something like that is great. Then I turn my attention back to my rods. You should never, ever, ever put rods away wet, because what happens then is you will get corrosion, and you also will get that kind of musty, mildewy kind of smell as the cork actually begins to rot. So I will always dry down, towel down all the whole segments of the rod again. It also keeps them nice and shiny, and we like nice and shiny. Just dry them through there. Just make sure you use your fingers, just go through all the little rod rings and stuff like that. Make sure there's no water left in there. Okay, so that's all dry now, so then I can put it away in its rod sock. And I know that even if I don't have time to get to it straight away when I get home, then I'm not going to have any issues with my tackle. So, time has passed, my reels are all dry now. I'm just going to make sure that they're all completely dry, run my cloth around through that. It really doesn't take very long, and it will save you a world of heartache later on. So that's what I do on the last day of my trip. then I'll put all my kit away. It's all back in where it should be. All my rods go back in my rod case, all my reels go back in my reel brief. So you've traveled home and you've got home, and actually at this point, I'm afraid I go through the entire process again, because sometimes in the destinations which we're at, the fresh water is not absolutely fresh. Sometimes it's brackish, sometimes it's been through a salt converter or something like that, and can still be a little bit of a tint of salt in there. So I make sure that when I get home, I chuck the whole lot in the bath, and actually I go through the process again. And this just means that I'm doubly making sure. What I actually do when I get home is I then actually strip off all of the backing onto my line winder, and I then clean the inside of the spool itself to make sure that there's no salt residue between the backing and the reel spool, because that is the key. That is where you find corrosion. And the number of times that I have taken backing off other people's reels and found actual pits in the metal. I don't care how good the anodizing is, it doesn't matter if it's type 2 or type 3, salt will find a way in. And it's not only on saltwater trips. I mean, what will happen on a freshwater trip is quite often you'll find micro sediment in there or something like that, which is no good for your reel drags either. One point I will say is when you are looking at reel drags, if you have one of the older style cork caliper drags, it's really important that you don't wipe off that kind of slightly dirty looking grease on top of the drag plate, because that's actually graphite grease. And the graphite grease is what maintains the cork caliper. So if you take that off, what happens is then it doesn't have the ability to not build up friction there anymore. So you end up by tearing the drag apart, which is, I've seen that happen on various trips where people have gone, oh, I've just wiped that off and replaced it with something else. Don't ever do that. When it comes to wiping rods down as well, I tend to use a little bit of Armorol, which is what you would normally use for cleaning up the inside of dashboards in cars. It's a silicone variant, and just spray a little bit of that on a cloth and wipe your rods down with that, and it just gives the whole rod a little bit of a protective sheen. It's also great for cleaning fly lines. So a bit of Armorol in one of the line cleaner boxes, and then just run your line all the way through that, and you'll find that that'll keep your lines nice and slick, make them last a lot longer. We do pay a lot of money for this kit. It is really important to try and keep it maintained for as long as possible. It's also better on a resale value if you've looked after it, if you're going to then start upgrading to the next gear for the following season. You know, he who dies with the most toys wins, obviously. If that video was of use, I would be extremely appreciative if you would like it and share it around, and also subscribe to our YouTube channel for more of these tips and tricks coming to you on a weekly basis. Thanks a lot for watching. I hope you found that useful video. A useful video? What's that? I don't know. Maybe we'll find out. We shall see. And back to Charlie.